Hey YouTube, vSecure here. Today we're going to talk about dynamic ARP inspection and IP SourceGuard. So dynamic ARP inspection and IP SourceGuard are the final layer 2 security technologies we're going to review. With DAI, dynamic ARP inspection, it looks at ARP requests from different ports and checks them against the DHCP snooping binding table. So if a MAC comes from a port without any data in the DHCP snooping table, it will get dropped. So this prevents gratuitous ARP attacks. And this attack is where a computer sends out an ARP request saying maybe that it's the gateway or another PC. Then the switch updates the CAM table with the attacker's computer as the gateway or that other computer, and the attacker becomes a man in the middle. So to configure dynamic ARP inspection, we need to understand the role the ports play. There are trusted and untrusted ports. A port going into endpoints should be untrusted, and ports going to other switches should be trusted. When a port is trusted, it turns the dynamic ARP inspection validation checks. So no lookups on the snooping table. So that's only when we trust it. So on trunk ports, the trust has to be set, and nothing else needs to be done as the standard state is untrusted. So in global configuration, so go into config T mode. The command we want to do is IP ARP inspection VLAN. I'm going to do it on VLAN 10. So this is the VLAN we enabled it on. So now that enables the configuration. Now if we had a trunk port, I don't think I have a trunk port. Let's just check. There's a couple. We'll put it on maybe. Oh, forgot to do a do. That's to ESX. We don't really want to do it there. I think we could do it to 1047. Yeah, we can do it on this one. So an interface TE1047. If this was an actual trunk port to a switch, this is the command we would use. IP ARP inspection trust. So these are the only commands needed for dynamic ARP inspection. However, without IP DHCP snooping enabled first, all traffic will be dropped. So it is very, very important that IP DHCP snooping is enabled before or set up at the same time before deployment. Now, there's one other case where you may see issues, and that is if there are static IP addresses in the network. If there's a static IP address, then DHCP snooping binding table has no information about the host and will drop traffic from that device. To get around this issue, we can create an ARP inspection filter. Now, the first step in creating the filter is to create an ARP ACL. Now, this wasn't really covered on the section when I was doing ACLs, so we'll quickly cover the format of an ARP ACL. The first step is to globally configure the name of the ACL using the following command. Get back to global. It's ARP access list and then a name. I'll just call it host. So we'll say this was a host that we want to allow that had a static IP. So now this goes into the ARP ACL submode. From there we can use the following command, say permit IP, the host IP, we'll just say it's 10.10.1.2. And then we have to give it the MAC of the host, MAC. Oops. Let me make sure I have it. 10.10.1.2. Oh, I'm sorry. We need the, if we're doing a host, so I can actually type in host. And then we don't have to have the subnet. And then it's MAC. And then we'll say it's a host since we'll know the MAC for this. And we'll just, pick a And then that's it. So here we want to use the permit to match on the traffic we want to filter. Everything else will be automatically denied and must go through dynamic ARP inspection. So once we have the ARP ACL configured, we create the filter using the following global commands. So let's get out of the sub mode. IP ARP Inspection filter, the ARP ACL name, host, and the VLAN that it's going to be attached to, and VLAN 10. So there. So that is the configuration for dynamic ARP inspection. We could do a couple quick checks to verify it's running, like show IP ARP inspection. And that just shows that we're enabled, that we have, we're enabled, operations inactive, we have an ACL match. It's turned on VLAN 10. I didn't turn on logging. We're not really passing any traffic. There's not really any traffic here to pass, so that's why we're not really seeing anything. But so and we could also use the show IP ARP inspection VLAN 10. That just narrows down if we had multiple VLANs to just the VLAN we want to look at. And one other good command is show IP ARP inspection interfaces. And this just shows you which ones are trusted. And we can see here's the one that I set to trusted. So this would be like the connection to another switch. So these commands will show what VLANs are enabled for dynamic ARP inspection, as well as what the interface is set to. Now, for IP SourceGuard, this technology protects against spoofing attacks. So it protects against spoofing attacks by, again, using the Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, DHCP, snooping binding table that is created when DHCP snooping is enabled. So this technology is very important to enable before enabling SourceGuard as well. So this is configured on a per port basis as well. And the command is IP verify source. Now, in some versions of code, it could be IP verify source VLAN or even IP verify source VLAN DHCP snooping. I just want to check something really quick. We're going to put it on 1030. So we're going to go back into config mode. I don't want to, just in case. I can't. I'm pretty sure I have DHCP snooping set here, but we'll see. So we'll go to 1030 and type in IP verify source. And let's see. Yep. We don't need any of the other commands. I usually think that's for a little bit older code. So it is then important to check, your documentation on your switch to see which versions you use. But like I said, I think it's usually a little bit older codes that use some of those commands, where they append VLAN or VLAN DHCP snooping. Now we have SourceGuard configured. What SourceGuard does is it creates a port ACL that only allows the IP that was determined from the DHCP snooping binding table. So if someone tries to use a different IP, spoof an IP, it will be blocked by that ACL. Now you may notice the same type of issue that you can run into a dynamic ARP inspection, that if I have a static IP, it'll be dropped. And yeah, that's going to happen here too. So to get around this, source binding entries need to be created, and the global configuration for that looks like this. IP source binding. So here we put the MAC address, the VLAN, the binding IP address. I think I said it was, that one that I picked. What interface, and I was doing this on 103, and then I can hit enter. And now this will create the static entry and allow the traffic in and out. So if you have static IP on that port, you're going to have to create this for SourceGuard to work properly. Now to do some verifications for SourceGuard that is working, we can use the command show IP verify source. We see here that it's enabled on 103. We're filtering by IP, filter mode inactive, no snooping VLAN. I don't think I have VLAN 10 here. That's why it's saying that. Yeah. And then we could also use the command show IP verify source interface and show IP source binding. So these commands help with determining if SourceGuard is enabled and if it's enabled on an interface and what the binding table looks like. So here we see the one that I created. So that pretty much covers IP SourceGuard and dynamic ARP inspection. In the next video, we'll go over some management features like configuring logging, SNMP, which are two very important tools when it comes to managing your network. Thanks for sticking around.